Father calls out to lost daughter on hiking trail, only to hear a stranger respond. But before we start, please take a moment to give this video a like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you'll never miss these great stories. John Utsi is a man of the wilderness who loves exploring nature, and it was a beautiful summer day when he and his kids decided to take advantage of the day and soak in some of that beautiful southwestern sun. The New Mexico residents were pumped for their family hike along the Windsor Trail in the Santa Fe National Forest, but had no idea that their day was quickly going to be flipped upside down in a matter of minutes. After losing sight of his daughter up ahead on the trail, John never would have expected to end up on a 2-day rescue mission off-trail. But soon everyone would find out that timing is everything, and maybe things really do happen for a reason. John Utsi, his 10-year-old son and 12-year-old daughter were all ready for their summer day hike that Saturday morning. And as fun as it is to do free-spirited and good-natured activities with your kiddos, sometimes it can be a bit tricky trying to keep their excitement under control. John's daughter got caught up in the beautiful nature and decided to sprint farther ahead in the trail, eventually losing sight of her father. And while that doesn't seem to be all that dangerous, sometimes a minor act like that can turn out to be so much more than you expect. As the daughter of an ex-Marine, it makes sense that John's preteen daughter would want to take the lead on the hike. It's in her blood. But as she rushed ahead in the trail, she quickly was nowhere to be seen. And no matter how easy a trail seems to be, when it has to do with nature, it's important to make sure that you stick together. But John was a former military man, and as soon as he lost sight of his little girl, he immediately called out to his daughter with a loud army cry. Even if his daughter wasn't that much further ahead, John didn't want to lose track of his daughter. "I called her name and she didn't answer," John shared with Fox 29 WFLX News. Where could she be? She didn't seem to have run along that far, so why wasn't she answering? "I then called her name really loud, and then I heard her yell back to me from way up around the corner of the trail," he further shared. But it was what happened next that caused shivers to run down his back. Can you imagine what it must be like to go out on a fun hike with the family, only to quickly lose sight of your precious daughter? There's no doubt that a range of emotions was rushing through him in those frightening moments, but the former military man was trained to stay calm in intense situations, and this was no time for panic. And just when he was starting to sense something was very wrong, he suddenly heard her voice. But that didn't mean they were in the clear. The two had yet to be reunited. The only person John was expecting to hear shout back at him was his daughter, but along with her cries back, he heard something else in the woods. It turns out that when John's daughter responded to his call, she wasn't the only one that heard him, and someone didn't just hear John, they actually responded. "I heard somebody else answer from way off the trail," John revealed. Who was this mystery person who cried out back to John? We're sure you can imagine just how thrown off John was when he heard someone else responding out to his yells while looking for his beloved daughter. Was it another hiker trying to play a silly game of Marco Polo? Was it someone who had found his daughter first? Was it a novice backpacker who got lost along the beautiful southwestern trail? Regardless of whoever this mystery person was, John's main focus and priority was to reunite with his daughter and make sure that she was okay. Even though John was a bit confused about who was calling out to him, he made sure to find his daughter. It was tricky knowing exactly where she was, since there was so much shrubbery and trees in his eyesight, but John felt relieved to know that she was at least on path. As John continued to call out, he heard her voice grow closer and closer in the direction of the trail ahead, which meant that he could easily get back to her as long as he stuck to the path. But the other person's noises were now also getting louder, and John knew that merely finding his daughter might not be his only mission. John continued along the trail to find his daughter, and finally, much to his relief, she was found safe and sound. However, now that they were reunited, John's focus immediately shifted. It was now clear that the person who was crying out to him wasn't someone dangerous or fooling around, but in fact it was someone in danger. John figured that the man might be in distress, considering that his voice seemed to come from a direction that was way off trail. John switched from father mode to fighter mode and continued to call out to see if the man would respond back to him. John was happy and relieved to find his daughter, but now he had to change the content of his calls and shouted, "Are you okay?" Sadly enough, it turned out he wasn't. Fighter mode quickly transformed into rescue mode, and John was on a mission to seek out this fellow hiker in need. The determined father and his kids hiked around the rocky Santa Fe Trail in search for this man, but weren't having any luck finding his location. Not only were they curious about where he was, but they were eager to get to him ASAP, seeing he was in distress. The former military man and the mystery man continued to shout to each other. As the minutes went by, the tension increased, but finally, after about half an hour, they united. The family had traveled all the way down a steep hill, a whopping 600 yards away from the trail, only to find the mystery man stranded and lying on the ground in a condition nobody was prepared to handle. The man was surrounded by a little makeshift camp that he set up alongside a creek, but it was clear he was in critical condition. His lips were all chapped to the point they were bleeding. His tongue was swollen. He was really gaunt and skinny. "I'm like, this guy really needs help," John reported to KRQE. Not only did the man seem delirious, but he wasn't even able to stand up, let alone move much. John knew he had to act fast. Even though the man was in need of immediate medical assistance, before John could do anything, he needed to further assess the situation. The man seemed to be about 60 years old, and he miraculously was able to make his way to the stream nearby to hydrate himself. But what exactly was he doing here in the middle of nowhere? I asked him, "What's wrong?" And he said, "My legs don't work." And I said, "What happened?" And he said, "I think I fell," John explained to CBC. How heartbreaking. It was unclear how many days the man had been stranded there for, but according to John's estimated guess, he figured he'd been alone and stranded for at least 2 weeks, maybe even more. John wanted to make sure to get this man to safety as quickly as possible, but in his state and condition, John wasn't sure they'd be able to get him out of there alone. Even with his 2 kids to help him, it seemed like a risk to attempt to move the man alone back to the beginning of the trail, especially since it was literally miles away. So what was he meant to do? John didn't want to abandon the man in his time of need, but he saw no other choice than to hike back with his children and call for professional help. The family left the man food and water and made sure to collect the exact GPS coordinates of where the man was located at before heading back to the trailhead. 3 miles later, the trio made their way back to the starting point of their journey and immediately called 911 to notify them of the situation. Little did they know that this was just the start of the rescue mission. Talk about a miraculous turn of events. Who knew that John's preteen daughter running into the woods would end with the family finding an abandoned, injured 60-something-year-old hiker in need? About an hour after John made the emergency call for help, the firefighters came to the rescue. With the exact coordinates of the man's location, the team of professional rescuers headed out on their mission. However, it didn't seem to do them any good, as they ended up having difficulties actually finding the man. When John heard the update of the firefighters' trouble to locate the injured hiker, he was left absolutely stunned and speechless. Where'd the man gone? Did someone else come to his rescue? Did he somehow manage to make it out of there on his own? Even if he did, he couldn't have gone far in his state and condition. 8 hours after the search began, the firefighters still had no idea where the man was. And with a heavy heart, the captain of the fire department had to decide what to do next. It was baffling enough that the man seemed to have survived on his own as long as he did. Can you imagine what the injured hiker must have felt all that time? Who knows how many people he tried to call out to for help? When you're in survival mode, your mental health and mindset are just as important as taking care of yourself physically. He had the will to survive for sure, John shared with WFLX. So how was it possible that all of a sudden he just disappeared? For some reason, the injured 60-year-old hiker was nowhere to be found. Nobody could wrap their heads around what had happened. Even with the additional sustenance that John and his family provided the man, there was no way he was stable enough to make it up the steep hill, let alone back 3 miles to the start of the trailhead without help. But alas, the search party was having no luck and had to make an executive decision to cancel the rescue mission. It was a little bit difficult to have to call off the search and rescue efforts. Captain Nathan Garcia of the Santa Fe Fire Department shared with a heavy heart to KRQE. When John got the update later that evening that the hiker was nowhere to be found and that the search party was called off, he was at a loss for words. I thought it was strange. Like, I figured if they were standing there and he wasn't, then something must have happened. It was so surreal. John further clarified to CBC. Well, it seemed like the compassionate father had done all that he could. He wasn't going to let this be the end of the story. John tossed and turned all night and couldn't help but think that something wasn't right. He didn't leave the man so that he could be abandoned again. John had left to go and get help and make sure that he was rescued safely. So I'm laying there on Saturday night, like this guy's still in the mountains, So at 9 o'clock Sunday morning, I get in and put my hiking boots back on and hike back, and he was exactly where I left him, John said to KRQE. How wild. John had no idea what to expect when he made his way back out to the woods, but he had this voice in the back of his head saying that he must find this helpless, sweet elder hiker no matter what. Amazingly enough, John was able to find him within a couple of hours. As soon as he found the man, the determined father called 911 again and made sure they knew exactly where they were located at. Hour after hour passed by, and John patiently waited with the injured hiker. After 8 hours of their initial search for the man the previous day, the rescue team couldn't find the injured man. However, with John right there next to him, they had higher hopes to be found. John made the call around noon that day, and the search party thankfully found them at around 4 o'clock that same afternoon. It had been about a whole day since John had initially found the man, and even then he was in critical condition and didn't look like he'd last even another day in this state. So what was his condition like by the time the rescue team found him? Everyone was blown away to know that this man was still holding on as strong as he could. The human body can do some amazing things sometimes, but I don't think he had very much left in him. He seemed kind of at the end when we actually did encounter him, Captain Nathan Garcia revealed to KRQE, but that didn't mean that anyone was going to give up on him. As soon as the rescue team arrived, they assessed the man's medical condition and state before deciding what to do next. Upon their assessment, the firefighters realized that they couldn't move the hiker immediately due to the fact that his body temperature was so low. So they prepared a fire for him to warm up and get his body temperature to a stable degree. Once they gave him the okay to move, the team snuggled him up with blankets to keep his temperature from dropping. It was clear that this man was a trooper, seeing as he survived this so far on his own. And as soon as he was in the arms of the Santa Fe Fire Department, with John right at his side, of course, everything was all uphill from there. It was almost like fate for John's daughter to have run up ahead on the trail so that her father could search for her, only to have them actually find this man in need. When he set out on his family hike that morning, he had no idea that he would end up on a 2-day rescue mission and end up saving a man's life. I heard one of the firefighters describe it as a needle in a haystack, and it really is. I mean, it's really rough country, John shared with CBC. What's just as amazing as John's determination to save the injured hiker in the first place is the fact that he survived and stayed alive in the wild in his state and condition. Never had we found somebody who'd been out there for so long, Captain Nathan Garcia revealed to KRQE. We can't imagine what those lonely days were like for the poor hiker to have endured, but it's safe to say that he had something special inside him to keep him going. What exactly happened to him, though? It wasn't just amazing that the hiker was able to survive on his own because he was injured, but he also had limited supplies and resources to keep him going. The man suffered from chronic back pain and again injured his back while hiking and could not stand or walk. His gear was stolen, at which point he got lost and disoriented, John explained to CBC. Talk about heartbreaking. But don't worry, there's a happy ending to this tale. After everything the man had been through and the rescue mission that felt like a wild roller coaster ride, that John was happy and grateful for the fact he didn't give up on his innocent elder hiker. The man was taken straight to the hospital to treat his injuries and nurse him back to a stable and healthy state. The trail might have been a family-friendly and easy trail, but it just goes to show how important it is to always notify someone of your whereabouts before heading out to nature. It's amazing how timing can be truly everything. And while John was the star hero of our story, it was a big team effort with the whole community. The Santa Fe Fire Department shared a post on Facebook about this rescue story, thanking everyone involved. Special thanks to John Utzi, the hiker that found him disoriented and provided food and water to him. Special thanks to the Atalaya Search and Rescue Team, as well as the Santa Fe Search and Rescue and Los Alamos Search and Rescue for all their help in getting the patient safely out of the forest.